In recent years, timber sales in the Black Hills National Forest have steadily declined, placing significant strain on timber product manufacturers. The U.S. Forest Service has been unable to justify these harvesting shortfalls in the Black Hills, and as a result, local timber businesses have been forced to absorb additional shipping costs to source timber from more distant locations. To address this issue, I've introduced the Timber Harvesting Restoration Act, which would require superintendents of National Forest System units to submit harvesting improvement reports to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture if they have consistently fallen well below the annual allowable sale quantity outlined in their forest plans. Sawmills in the Black Hills have borne the brunt of these shortfalls. In response to the reduced timber supply, some producers have been forced to scale back operations or close sawmills altogether. My question today, sir, is I've been encouraged by the administration's plans to increase the speed and scale of timber production on federally managed lands. Can you highlight any specific actions or plans the Forest Service has to improve the situation in the Black Hills National Forest?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, so this has been a high priority. I've been familiar with the Black Hills issues for years, and I've actually been involved with shutting down a sawmill that was tied to lack of available saw timber, so I understand the issues firsthand. In particular, at the Black Hills, there was a meeting probably 6 weeks ago with industry, with conservation entities, with the Forest Service to develop a plan, a short-term plan and a long-term plan. And my understanding is that within the next 2 weeks, that short-term plan should be coming forward that will lay out a strategy for the next 12 months, what that plan is going to look like. And then beyond that, there's a longer-term plan being developed looking at the opportunity for stewardship contracts, good neighbor agreement contracts. We've also detailed a person from a forest in Region 6 to the Black Hills to assist. That's been very effective and assist the timber staff there. So it's something that is front and center for us. I'm familiar with the issues. I know the industry players as well as the entities that are working to help us.
Thank you for that. Let me talk about accountability a little bit. Are you planning on, in your new plan, to have accountability measures that the Forest Service would be able to use to review whether or not the regional staff are effectively following through on the timber harvesting improvement plans that would be put in place?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. In response to the executive order titled Immediate Expansion of American Timber Production, the Forest Service has proposed a national timber strategy aimed at increasing domestic timber production by 25% over the next 5 years. Unfortunately, under the strategy, Region 2, which includes South Dakota, is projected to increase timber production by only 2%. How are those regional percentages determined, and how will the strategy address the immediate need of the timber industry in the Black Hills, where timber availability put up for harvest by the Forest Service has declined drastically over the last 5 years, outside of what the forest plan was in the first place?
Senator, that initial analysis was based on having $200 million available to allocate across the country. And what they did was they looked at from 2020 through 2024 in terms of outputs. So they used that as a guide to allocate $200 million across the National Forest System. So they're trying to allocate funding where there's a greater likelihood of outputs. So that's not a drawn in the sand line. That's based on those additional dollars being brought to the table. So we have an existing program that already exists today that $200 million is in addition to our existing funding. So we're exploring other options. We're exploring options working with the state of Wyoming under a broader good neighbor agreement where they would actually manage some of the National Forest System lands in partnership with the Forest Service. We're looking at a long-term stewardship agreement that could be administered and provide less cost to the Forest Service. So those numbers right there, that's additional outputs tied only to a preliminary thought on allocation of funds. It's not a constraint. It's saying that if we had this $200 million and we allocate it like this based on our current cost structure, that's what that additional output would look like. But that's not drawn in the sand.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. Chief Schultz, concerned landowners in western South Dakota have contacted my office regarding minor fence line disputes between producers and federal officials. My understanding is that such disagreements are relatively common in areas with a high concentration of Forest Service land. I believe landowners deserve a fair notice and a review process when disputes with the federal government arise. How do you plan to address these concerns and make sure that landowners are treated fairly in such cases?
Senator, I appreciate the question. So a couple things. One, when we're aware of specific issues, we will address those specific issues. But I've also reached out to some of the trade associations that work with the ranching community to better understand what some of their priorities are. And we're working with them to understand how we can, from a policy perspective, approach things more from a communication across the country. And then when there's specific issues, we'll deal with those on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, not necessarily turning it into a criminal action.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.